listener production.
Hey, Tara Cassidy with you, and welcome to The Briefing. Lost in the wilderness, limited food, no water or shoes. Against all odds, German backpackers managed to pull off a miracle this week, surviving 11 days in remote WA, with experts saying it all came down to some key choices she made. So if it happened to you, would you know what to do?
Try and stay as even as you can. Celebrate your little wins. You got a fire started, you found a shelter, you found a source of water. Don't over-celebrate them. Try and stay level-headed and try not to give in to that fear.
That chat with a survivalist on how to stay alive and what absolutely not to do if you ever get lost is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Chris Spiru. It's Wednesday, the 16th of July.
Hey Tara, and to you listening, we're starting in Beijing, where Anthony Albanese's been a busy boy, signing not one, not two, but 6 new deals with China. We're also buddies again, apparently, with China's premier commending Albo for his personal efforts in mending our relationship with Beijing, which was soured under the Morrison government's hardline COVID-era stance that prioritised national security over trade and diplomacy. And now trade is back in the spotlight with these new agreements, which include updated deals on customs, inspections and quarantine, so more Aussie fruits like apples can hit Chinese shelves, and Chinese jujubes, I'm pretty sure I got the pronunciation there wrong, which is a small apple-like fruit, can land in ours.
Yeah, and the deals also follow Albo's second meeting with President Xi as PM, where he raised trade, the detention of Aussie Yang Henjun on undisclosed espionage charges, and called for more notice before China's live fire drills near our coast, like those in the Tasman Sea earlier this year. Now, that last request was something the president didn't seem all that interested in.
President Xi said that China engaged in exercises just as Australia engages in exercises.
Yeah, which is a point that Albanese kind of made at the time as well. He said that technically China wasn't doing anything wrong here when it came to international law. They were just acting a little less friendly by not giving us a bit more heads up, and that was a bit of a contentious point around the election. Now look, Albo has come under fire over, being in China and kind of quote-unquote pandering to China, because a lot of conservative experts are saying that China is taking full advantage of trade uncertainty thanks to Donald Trump, and that they've found really fertile ground in Australia, whereas supporters of Albo and his position say, right now is the perfect time to be investing in our geographic neighbours and strategically making sure our eggs are in as many baskets as possible, and that includes a country like China, an economic powerhouse. They may be a communist country with some questionable human rights positions, but at the end of the day, they are a country that is steering the global economy in a way that Australia should be making sure that we have some deals here.
Police are warning a list of childcare centres that accused child abuser Joshua Brown worked at will likely grow due to poor record-keeping practices at the facilities where he was employed. Yesterday, authorities revealed 4 more centres where Brown's known to have worked between 2024 and 2025, including in Victoria's Mickleham, Tarneet, Braybrook and Greensborough areas. Since Brown was arrested, the Sexual Crimes Squad has also had to execute search warrants and seize handwritten rosters, records and other vital information due to some centres not having these centralised systems, Chris, where the information would be digitally kept.
Yeah, and it's also had to review more than 270 reports on Crime Stoppers and interview further witnesses to help fill in the rest of the gaps in Brown's employment history from his 8 years as an early childhood educator. Victoria's opposition leader says the childcare sector and its systems have failed parents who are undoubtedly feeling highly distressed as they wait to hear if their child's been impacted. Meanwhile, the Victorian government has promised to adopt every recommendation that comes from the urgent review that's been ordered into the sector, as well as its working with children checks.
Yeah, and it's also confirmed that it will establish an educator register in the coming weeks that will link up to an eventual national registration system. Now, police have also said that in addition to that location list growing, the dates will most likely also change too. So any parents who are checking that list, make sure to check those. But this revelation around the centres not having these centralised systems, that's so concerning. Like experts have pointed out, they use digital software for lots of different things. They report back to parents about food and sleep and injuries, anything like that. And also it's meant to be used to ensure that there's enough staff watching the kids, which is something we found out was not happening in these cases. And this is all exactly what was said by child safety expert John Rouse, who I spoke with last week, and he was saying that these are really basic things and they really need a national register for many reasons. One, for this, better record keeping, but also it picks up staff that are moving between centres, and he says that is a massive red flag. So really insightful chat. Go back and have a listen if you're interested. We'll chuck a link to that in the show notes.
Violence and aggression is the worst it's ever been in some Australian classrooms, with a number of state schools reporting such incidents every 4 minutes. In Queensland, some teachers are reportedly being subjected to nearly 120 violent incidents a day, with the union saying it's the worst it's ever been. It includes children kicking, hitting, biting, throwing objects and verbally abusing teachers.
Yeah, and according to the state's education minister, in the first term of 2025 alone, there'd been over 5,700 reports of work-related violence and aggression towards teachers, and that's a more than 20% increase from the term prior. Now, these cases have predominantly been reported in primary schools and schools for children with diverse needs, with the union president saying that there's been a shift in the last decade, with more kids with learning disabilities and difficulties actually now attending mainstream schools. And interestingly, teachers have also reported a noticeable shift in attitudes, Chris, and not just from children, but parents and caregivers. And they're reporting this lack of respect that's being shown, and far less toward teachers than what was given in previous generations.
Yeah, the union says the problem's so rife it's contributing to staff shortages in the sector. And while these particular stats revolve around Queensland, we know that this is something that's happening in every state and territory. For example, in New South Wales, where I am, we know police are called to public, primary and particular schools hundreds of times a year relating to these types of incidents, over 850 call-outs in 2023 alone, while in Victoria the issue has tripled in a decade. Just last month, Vic's own stats showed teachers are being attacked and bullied in public schools up to 150 times a day as well, which is just crazy.
Yeah, that's just horrific. I mean, what is going on? I've always hated when I hear older demographics, saying kids these days, they're so entitled. But when you see stats like this, you have to question something is obviously going on. There's obviously some truth to it. What is leading to this lack of respect from both kids and parents? And is it predominantly attitudes, or are there also more kids with extra needs and learning difficulties? They obviously need to figure out more about what's going on, and we need an inquiry into this, Chris.
Yeah, there are a whole heap of factors at play that are contributing to this, but we do know we have a bunch of teachers who listen to the briefing each and every morning. Good morning to you. We're going to pop a prompt out on our broadcast channel on Instagram about this. Feel free to get in touch with us there or in our DMs.
First Nations people and climate activists are among those sharing their disappointment in a federal court ruling over the Torres Strait Islands, which has been dubbed a loss for cultural preservation and the environment. The decision was handed down yesterday, dismissing a landmark case which argued the federal government had breached its duty of care to protect them and its people from the impacts of climate change.
The case was brought by two traditional owners in 2021 and argued the government had failed in its duty by not reducing emissions that had harmed their island communities. And where they live, Tara, is somewhere where the water is rising and essentially their islands are sinking. So here's some of Justice Michael Wigney's judgment from Cairns yesterday.
Governmental conduct and decisions which involve matters of high or core government policy are not properly or appropriately made the subject of common law duties of care.
So an English translation there, what he's saying is that it's not the court's job to be making government policy, that is the job of the government.
Yeah, and interestingly, he criticised the government's climate efforts, calling its emission targets unquestionably modest and unambitious, and warning that without action, the applicants risk losing their islands, culture and way of life, becoming climate refugees. And Uncle Paul, one of the applicants, said he was in shock and calling the pain he was experiencing one shared by all people, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, while one elder described it as a moral loss for the government, vowing to continue fighting for future generations. And look, it's interesting because this is actually a case that's been argued elsewhere in the world and people have actually won. In other countries, plaintiffs have said that their government owes them a duty of care to protect them from climate harms by doing things like lowering emissions. And I mean, we are an island nation. For anyone who lives near the water or feels the effects of climate change, perhaps you're in an area that's frequently impacted by severe and frequent weather events, and well, this might be something you would care about. But unfortunately for this group, they've not won here in Australia, and this particular argument, it has had mixed results here. But climate advocates do say that, look, the momentum is building globally with more and more courts holding governments accountable for this kind of thing.
And the Emmy goes to...
No one yet, because the nominations have just come in, Chris. But wow, there are some cracking TV series that are clearly leading the charge this year, including the psychological thriller series directed by Ben Stiller, Severance, which a great series, if I do say so myself. And it's up against Andor, The Diplomat, The Last of Us, go Pedro Pascal, Paradise, The Pit, Slow Horses, and White Lotus for the coveted Outstanding Drama category.
Yes, White Lotus has actually been nominated for a whopping 23 awards this year. The studio's also been nommed. That's the comedy drama series created by Seth Rogen on Apple TV, which I highly, highly recommend every single one of you listening go and find and watch because it is brilliant. But you will have to wait until September to find out who's taking home the prize, with the Night of Nights taking place then at the Peacock Theatre in Los Angeles. Something you and I, Tara, will be watching yet again from afar. Because you have a wedding to pay for and I have a Europe trip that I am leaving for on Saturday.
We broke.
We are so broke.
We are so broke. But look, I love these noms. I love Severance. I love White Lotus. But who would know if the end of the latest season is any good, Chris? Because bloody HBO removed it from binge right as I got into the last episode. And I refuse to get it out in our HBO out of protest, because why would you do that to me?
Yeah. I felt the same way about binge, but now that HBO has come out, binge is slowly dying. I'm pretty sure this is something we've spoken about. If I find the episode, I'll pop it in the show notes. But I am glad that the exodus is happening, and Tara, we'll wait and see if you join the people leaving binge for HBO. You say no now, but they will wear you down. That's how they do it. That's how they get you in.
I already pay for too many. I don't need another one. I'm trying to palm them off, not add more to my slate. Anyway, that brings our headlines to a close for today. Next up is my deep dive, looking into how a German backpacker survived 11 days in the Australian wilderness and the things that could keep you alive if it ever happened to you.
A miracle in the WA outback. A missing German backpacker has been found.
Carolina Wilga has been found alive.
She's been located walking on a bush track by a member of the public.
In her mind, she had convinced herself that she was not going to be located. No one's coming.
I stopped and, I just went out and gave her a hug and said, look, everybody's been looking for you. She couldn't believe it. She said, you're my guardian angel. I go, well, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Guardian angel, wits, or just pure luck, police say Carolina being found alive and well is truly a miracle, after she endured the elements of the remote WA wilderness for 11 days, drinking from puddles, digging holes to stay warm, and even sleeping in a cave. And it's those choices that survival experts like Jake Cassar say kept her alive. Jake is a bushcraft teacher, tracker and expert survivalist who's spent decades living, breathing and teaching everything there is to know about braving the bush. In fact, he joins us from there right now, from right beside his campfire. Jake, thank you so much for joining me on the briefing today. Heavy rain, sub-zero temps, no shoes and minimal food and water. How lucky is Carolina really to have survived this?
Well, it sounds like she had the right game plan from everything that I've seen, from the little I've actually seen online. It sounds like she sought shelter, which is critically important, especially this time of year in freezing conditions. And she's been able to access water. It doesn't have to be the best source of water. It's just got to be a source of water. Ideally, you'd want to boil that water or filter that water, but beggars can't be choosers. And in this situation, it sounds like she may not have had the means to make a fire to boil water, or probably didn't have a pot on her as well, I'm imagining. They do have the old golden rule of stay with your vehicle, but at times, particularly if you don't have access to water, you are going to need to get out of your vehicle and you're going to have to go and look for water. So I'd be really, really interested to find out the finer details. Where did she find water? I heard she got it from a few puddles, another good move. So shelter and water are your main two things. It sounds like this young lady had the right idea, and that's what's led her to safety. She's found what we call a handrail in survival, and that could be a road, a fence, similar to rabbit-proof fence where the kids follow the fence all the way home. You can do that. And ideally, if you can mark the spot where you got lost, your vehicle, the track where you realised you were lost, and keep coming back to that point. So heading out in a straight line, you could look for a big tree in the distance and mark that tree, which serves two really good purposes. You can find your way back to where you originally get lost so you don't get more lost, and rescuers, the authorities, they can spot those marks on the trees and know that you've been in that area.
Now, police, like you mentioned, had mentioned that she did leave her car before deciding to try and find help, and she stayed with it for about a day. And then she was saying that she, deciding to kind of where she wanted to go, she was looking at the sun and was trying to go west. Is there any rhyme or reason behind that thinking?
Well, it depends on where you are. So a lot of people will head east if they're lost on the coastline, which the vast majority of people live on the coastline in Australia. It's not a bad plan. But you can encounter difficulties, which I have myself. I've been disorientated in the bush. It happens to the best of us. I've spent my whole life getting out and about in the bush, and I've headed east before and ended up in a massive patch, about 100-metre thicket of Smilax australis, which we call bush barbed wire, and I would have needed a machete and 4 or 5 days to be able to cut through that. So knowing the general direction in which you're heading can be helpful, but it can also get you into deeper trouble. You can end up more stuck than what you were in the start. So I would say definitely stay as close as you can to near where you went missing. And again, just to reiterate that point of making marks on trees or piling up rocks with arrows going back to your camp. Not so much marks on the ground, that can help, but if it rains or it's really windy, it can wash it away. And then make sure you can go back to fairly close to where you went missing, and then do the hands of the clock, looking for that puddle, looking for that little shelter. If you're trained up on bushcraft and survival, looking for something to give you some carbohydrates, some fat and some protein if you're going to be out there for a couple of weeks.
You mentioned that ideally in these scenarios, if your car breaks down, the best advice is to stay with it. Why is that?
Well, stay relatively close to your vehicle. It's something which will be spotted from the sky. It's something it's a pretty obvious landmark if somebody's driving past it to find an abandoned car at the side of a lonely, dusty track. So it's a really good idea not only to stay close to your vehicle, but just to stay close in general to where you went missing. But sometimes that's not an option. So understanding the overall topography of the land, where the mountains lie, where the low points are, where you're likely to find water, where there might be sandstone or limestone caves. If you can get shelter and get water and fight off hypothermia this time of year, then you're likely to survive for 30 to 40 days. Some people have survived a lot longer just eating some very, very basic wild foods, which I wouldn't recommend unless you really knew what you were doing.
Wow. And what about if people are wanting to kind of go on these kinds of trips? They might want to go remote. They might even want to travel solo. What do you think the non-negotiables are if you are contemplating going and doing that kind of thing?
Well, I really think we need to not only develop a booklet. A booklet would be a great idea to start off with for keeping yourself safe. It could have a checklist of different things to make sure you've got in your backpack, like a compass and a map and GPS. I know in New South Wales you used to be able to, and possibly still can, get a personal locator beacon from the police to take with you if you're doing an extended hike, or you can pick one up for a couple of $100. So that'll hit the button and they'll find you. They'll find you at some point, and that's about obviously saving lives, but it's also about resources and sending the volunteers and the police out, which are really, really busy doing other things. So proper prior planning prevents poor performance. It's a great idea to have something to make fire with, not just a lighter or a box of matches, a ferrocerium rod, the ones that you scrape and the sparks come off. Takes a little bit of skill to get it right, but even if it's been pouring down rain, you get to a stringy bark, a local eucalypt species, which you get right across Australia, a peppermint species. You strip away that wet bark and get to the really dry tinder on the inside, and you will be able to create a fire. Once you get that fire blaring, it'll be able to be seen from the sky at night. During the day, you're going to put green leaves on there, not dry leaves, make sure they're green, and pile them up really high, and it's going to send smoke out into the atmosphere, and you've got a really, really good chance of being found. Apart from that, if you don't have the means to make fire, or you haven't learned survival skills like friction fire, then in many cases, and I work as a tracker, people just don't end up getting found. They're beyond a needle in a haystack. It is pretty close to impossible to find them. The odds are stacked against you.
And so in that more extreme scenario, say someone goes backpacking, they go hiking, and for whatever reason they do find themselves lost, what would be your top focus tips for people, like the absolutes to do? Is it, like you said, fire, shelter, obviously trying to find water? Are there any main things that are really important, or do you have to make sure you're conserving energy?
Yeah, so that's really important. First, I think it's important to come to terms with the situation that you're faced in, being a bushcraft teacher and working with some remote Aboriginal communities and ending up not only at Whoop Whoop, but out the back of Whoop Whoop and getting stuck in certain situations, and people that I've been with, like bogged or whatever it might be, and people that I've been with have started to panic. That can be contagious if you're with a group. So one of the main things is to try and stay as even as you can. Don't pretend that you're not in a pretty tough situation, a scary situation. Don't pretend that everything's going to be fine, because then you're going to really, really collapse. I've seen that happen with people, and I get a lot of people come to me and say, oh, Jake, I ended up lost in this situation, and this is what happened. So try and stay as even as you can. Celebrate your little wins. You got a fire started. You found a shelter. You found a source of water. Don't over-celebrate them. Try and stay level-headed and try not to give in to that fear. Try not to let it debilitate you, because that seems to be what happens with people. And it's not only going to stop you from acting the best you can in those situations, but it's also going to dehydrate you. That panic is going to stress your body out. It's going to lift your heart rate up. So they say 3 days without water. If you're extremely panicked and in really cold circumstances, you can be extremely dehydrated in half a day through the stress and all that. So water is incredibly important. Again, I'd suggest people jump on a survival course and go and learn how to procure water in the bush. There's certain vines like Cissus antarctica, 5-fingered water vine, which you can get litres of water out of if you know how to do it. There's the roots of many Banksia species. You can blow water out of the roots. If you've got a plastic bag, you can drain a little bit of water out of the leaves using kind of making the leaves sweat. There's plenty of different ways to make a fire. All the Xanthorrhoea species or grass tree species, you can start a friction fire with your hands or with a bow drill using a shoelace. It's mainly keeping your body temperature at a healthy range, staying hydrated and staying out of the elements.
Yeah, it's a great skills to have. Gosh, this takes me back to doing cadets going on a bivouac and learning all these survival skills. Obviously, this is your lifestyle, this is your business, so it might be a little bit biased in this answer, but do you think that if people are going to try and tackle this kind of, whether it be camping or hiking or going out into these areas, that they should kind of back themselves with these kinds of skills and try and get educated on those basics?
I believe it really needs to be in our curriculum. It's like learning self-defense from someone who's actually one of you. That's the kind of people you want to spend time with, that are going to teach you the skills of how to make fire with a variety of ways, not only having all the gear, because that's really important, means to make fire, but there's an old saying, some people have got all the right gear but no idea.
So be prepared. That sounds like some sage advice to finish on. Jake, thank you very much for joining me on the briefing today.
Okay.
That was survivalist and bushcraft teacher Jake Cassar speaking with me there on the things you need to know if you ever need to brave the bush. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. If you found this ep interesting, don't forget to leave us a comment or a review, or you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.
Listener.